Hello, and thank you for taking the time to view SkyTooth's official net neutrality public statement and awareness presentation. We're going to review a little bit of information on the Net Neutrality Act and give you an idea on how it will affect SkyTooth subscribers and the internet as a whole. In order to fully understand the pros and cons of net neutrality, we must first ensure we have a thorough understanding of what it entails. When the internet first came of age in the early to mid-90s, the majority of web servers were established exclusively to handle emails and chat rooms. Very few online servers were dedicated exclusively to the concept of a web page, and the total of the world's internet traffic was easily handled by existing analog telephone line networks. Nowadays, chat rooms have for the most part disappeared, and every possible web page you can imagine has been created. Emails are rapidly replacing the postal service, but even after all this growth, the internet traffic dedicated to emails and web pages is but a mere drop in the bucket compared to the major traffic makers, which are streaming audio-video services and telecommunications infrastructure. Even the voice-over internet phone and cloud services have overtaken the old internet in the data usage race. Simply put, when an ISP customer pays their monthly bill, net neutrality seeks to ensure that availability to all of the internet is provided without favor or exclusion. Net neutrality put into law that web content is determined solely by the customer demand and not by the hosting ISPs. Of course, there are two sides to every argument that should be heard in order to determine where the middle ground lies. We are going to start with the opponents to net neutrality and the arguments that they pose. In the days of the old internet, a single piece of legislation was created to serve as guidelines and regulation over the entire telecom industry. The 1996 Telecom Act made few mentions to the internet and only specifically regulated one aspect of it, which was 56K dial-up availability. No regulations at all were imposed on any of the other internet-related technologies, including the latest DSL and cable broadband technologies. The major regulations dealt with payphones and landline-based telephone, with brief mentions to Windows 95 compatibility and local phone numbers for dial-up access. In the Telecom Act, landline telephones are classified as a utility and thus fell under FCC regulatory guidelines for pricing and service availability. What does not show up in the Telecom Act are wireless carriers, voice-over internet phones, streaming multimedia, or any modern traffic control practices such as throttling or data limits. Because these technologies, services, and practices are not classified as or fall under an existing utility, it is unlawful for the FCC to regulate them. Any new regulations outside of the scope of the Telecom Act should be fought tooth and nail. After all, in a free market, it is understood that more regulations can only serve to hinder growth and innovation. Opponents are also quick to point out the other places in the world where either fascist or communist regimes spend millions of dollars regulating, filtering, and censoring the internet for political purposes, and we definitely never want to follow in their footsteps. According to the ISPs, although a non-throttled, on-demand internet is preferable, it is simply not a realistic goal. This is due to exceptionally large percentages of streaming content that inundates the overall bandwidth which is available to them, thereby causing slow internet speeds. Internet service providers believe that if the majority of bandwidth is used for streaming multimedia, then streaming multimedia should have to pay its fair portion of the cost to maintain it. In a free market system, the ISPs should be able to bill the content providers for prioritized traffic through their networks. Now let's take a look at the supporting arguments for enforcing the Net Neutrality Act. The 1996 Telecom Act mentions the terms voice over internet, ISP, download, upload, wireless carrier, and search engines a total of 0 times in its entirety. Instead, the bill did mention the word internet a total of 11 times, the word payphone a total of 18 times, and the words Bell Operating Company, aka four-wire landline telephone company, a total of 130 times, thereby reflecting its dire need for an update to modern technology. Wireless carriers are not referenced as utilities, and therefore their products and practices regulated because they did not yet exist when the Telecom Act was signed into law. Had these technologies existed, they would also be classified as a utility and fall under the same FCC guidelines for pricing and service. And let's not forget our fascist and communist neighbors, whom spend millions of dollars maintaining censorship and content filtering. The grim reality, which nobody wishes to acknowledge, is that these countries do not even come close to matching the billions of dollars which is spent in the free world on content filtering and censorship. Net neutrality seeks to ensure that all competitive companies have equal access to the internet, thereby leaving the field for new emerging companies to step up and compete with the old. After all, competition is good for everybody and drives innovation. If allowed to prioritize traffic, ISPs also gain the ability to smother out that competitive spirit and innovation for exclusivity agreements. This would determine which services and content providers are available to the paying consumer based on the highest bid, thereby establishing a true monopoly. The same scenario applies to telecom providers, as their data infrastructure can simply be throttled out of existence to give an affiliated company a competitive advantage and to prevent new technologies from making older ones obsolete. Unaware of why their quality of service is diminished, the end consumers will simply fall in line and switch to the provider which provides a higher quality of service. So, with an understanding of both sides of the net neutrality debate, how does this affect SkyTooth and its subscriber base? The answer is not at all. You see, with other ISPs, overall data consumption only becomes a problem if there is simply not enough bandwidth to go around. So as usage steadily increases, ISPs are steadily forced to expand their overall bandwidth to compensate. In order to do this, ISPs must install more, bigger, and faster fiber connections to interconnect themselves and the World Wide Web. This is extremely expensive, and these ISPs will spend millions on the installation of a single fiber trunk. In an attempt to consolidate and even curb this spending, prioritized bandwidth agreements and passing the bill on to content providers seems like a good idea to save a little bit of money from their point of view. After all, it is always in a company's best interest to make more money without having to spend more money, so long as no ethical lines are crossed from their perspective. Instead of spending millions installing more fiber trunks to expand bandwidth, SkyTooth uses a different approach. For a fraction of the cost, dedicated line-of-sight data backhaul points can be established into existing key fiber networks, thereby increasing overall bandwidth much more efficiently than traditional methods. By doing so, however, this will depreciate the overall value of existing fiber trunk networks, and that would be devastating for these ISPs, as this is what they consider to be their equitable market value. You see, we at SkyTooth do not believe that an on-demand, consumer-driven internet is so far-fetched or unattainable. After all, this is how the internet has consistently continued to grow since its inception. What's more, we believe that ISP's net worths are based not on the size of its in-ground fiber network, but on its ability to facilitate a bandwidth supply to match the demand of its own market share. We feel it's genuinely sad to consider that after 20 years of internet driving this country's innovation and growth, we now need intervention from a federal regulatory agency to remind corporate America that the internet in fact does not belong to them. And just because we have the ability to censor, throttle, and filter content to increase profit margins, this does not necessarily make it ethical to do so. If big ISPs truly feel that an on-demand, consumer-driven internet is an impractical goal, we would like to offer, in the spirit of good competition, a small piece of our charter to help them reevaluate their priorities. These are 3 critical business objectives which our model was founded upon. We believe that these 3 goals must be met in order to maintain a successful business. 1. Produce a quality product or service to be retailed at an affordable price based on the average income of your target consumer. 2. Always maintain employee loyalty by providing wages sufficient for a middle-class lifestyle based on a national average income. 3. Maintain continuous growth by consistently making your own products and services obsolete before your competition does. If any of the critical business objectives cannot be achieved, simply put, you do not have a viable business, and failure is inevitable, specifically due to one or more of the following causes. Either 1, your company no longer has a viable product or service, or they are structured upon an invalid or outdated business plan. 2, upper management has achieved a level of where they now fail to overcome their own incompetencies, according to the Peter Principle. Or 3, corporate officers and shareholders have either intentionally or unintentionally over-prioritized their own worth and compensation. If these basic principles are achieved and adhered to, then we can avoid the situation we have today. A situation where a federal regulatory agency feels the need to censor, regulate, and filter in order to prevent big ISPs from censoring, filtering, and regulating. Thank you for your time. Have a great day.